The supermarket was alive with its usual chaos, shopping carts clattering, kids whining for candy, cashiers calling for price checks. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, illuminating endless rows of goods stacked neatly on shiny metal shelves. For most people, it was just another ordinary day. But for one woman, this day would become unforgettable. At the entrance of the store walked in a small, gentle figure, a black elderly woman in her late 70s. She wore a simple floral dress, her hair wrapped neatly in a scarf, and she leaned slightly on a cane as she pushed her shopping cart. Despite her frail frame, there was dignity in the way she carried herself. She smiled at the greeter, nodded politely at passing strangers, and hummed softly under her breath. She wasn't in a rush. She never was. Shopping, for her, wasn't just about groceries, it was her way of staying connected with the world, of moving through life at her own pace. She stopped in front of the fruit section, carefully lifting apples one by one, checking for bruises. "Excuse me, young man," she said warmly to a stock boy stacking bananas. "Could you help me pick the sweet ones? My eyes aren't what they used to be." The boy hesitated, glanced around, then gave a small smile and picked a few for her. "These should be good, ma'am." "Thank you, son," she replied, her voice gentle. She placed them carefully into her cart as if they were treasures. A few other customers noticed her, some smiling at the kindness in her tone. But not everyone was patient. A couple waiting nearby tapped their feet, whispering under their breath about her being too slow. One woman rolled her eyes dramatically, muttering, "Some people need to shop online instead of holding everyone up." The elderly woman either didn't hear or chose not to respond. She simply moved along, aisle by aisle, studying prices, holding items close to her face to read the tiny print. At the canned goods section, she squinted hard at 2 brands of beans, then waved down an employee. "Sweetheart, could you tell me which one is on sale?" she asked politely. The young cashier pulled a small scanner from her belt, checked, and pointed. "This one, ma'am. 2 for the price of 1. "Oh, bless you," the woman said with a grateful smile, carefully placing 2 cans in her cart. To anyone watching, it was clear, she wasn't trying to be difficult. She was simply moving at the pace of someone who had lived a long life and wanted to get things right. But in a world obsessed with speed and convenience, patience is often in short supply. By the time she reached the checkout, the line had grown behind her. She fumbled in her purse, slowly pulling out coupons she had clipped from the weekly flyer. Her hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from age. The cashier took the coupons, scanning them one by one, but the machine beeped at a few. The elderly woman leaned in closer, her voice soft. "Are you sure? It says right here, buy 2, get 1 free." The people in line began to groan. One man sighed loudly, muttering, "Come on, lady, some of us have jobs to get back to." Still, the elderly woman kept her composure. She adjusted her glasses, rechecked the coupon, and waited calmly for the cashier to sort it out. She had lived through worse storms than impatient shoppers. To her, this was just another day, another errand. She had no idea that within minutes, everything around her would erupt into chaos, and that her quiet dignity would set the stage for a reckoning the entire store would never forget. The checkout lane had grown restless. The line of customers behind the elderly woman stretched longer and longer, their sighs echoing louder with each passing minute. The cashier, a nervous young woman barely out of high school, fumbled with the coupons, glancing anxiously toward the back of the store as if hoping for backup. That backup was about to arrive, though not in the way anyone expected. From across the store, heavy footsteps approached. A man in his mid-40s, tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing a navy blue manager's vest, marched toward the register. His jaw was tight, and his eyes narrowed like a predator spotting prey. His name tag gleamed, Mr. Collins, store manager. Collins had a reputation. Employees whispered about his temper, his arrogance, his lack of patience for anyone he deemed inconvenient. To him, this wasn't a grocery store, it was his kingdom. And in his kingdom, slowing down his schedule was an unforgivable sin. "What's the holdup here?" Collins barked, his voice slicing through the checkout noise. The young cashier froze. It's just, her coupons aren't scanning, sir. I'm trying to. Collins waved her off. His eyes locked onto the elderly woman, who was still rifling through her purse with shaky hands, looking for the last coupon. You, he snapped, pointing a finger at her. You're holding up the entire line. People have things to do. Either pay full price or get out of the way. The elderly woman looked up, startled but not cowed. Young man, I've been shopping here for 20 years. I just want what was advertised. That's all. Her voice was calm, steady, too calm for Collins's liking. The line behind her murmured. A mother with 2 kids whispered, just let her finish, but Collins ignored it. I don't care how long you've been shopping here, he sneered. You're wasting everyone's time. He stepped closer, towering over her as if his size alone could intimidate her into silence. The woman straightened slightly, leaning on her cane. I'm not wasting time. I'm paying for my groceries like everyone else. I just want what's fair. That one word, fair, seemed to ignite something ugly in Collins. His face twisted, and without warning, he leaned forward, his voice booming. Fair? You're a problem, lady. And I don't tolerate problems in my store. The cashier tried to intervene. Sir, please, she's just. Quiet, Collins snapped at her, raising his hand as if to silence not just the cashier, but the entire world. And then it happened. With a flash of rage, Collins lashed out. His open palm cracked across the elderly woman's cheek. The sound echoed like a gunshot through the store. For a split second, silence fell over the entire checkout area. Even the beeping of scanners seemed to pause. The woman staggered slightly, clutching her face. Her purse slipped from her hands, spilling coupons and coins across the floor. Gasps erupted. A child cried out. A man in the line shouted, "Did he just hit her?" The cashier's eyes went wide with horror, her hands trembling over the register. Other employees froze in place, their faces pale with shock. No one moved. No one spoke. Collins stood there, chest heaving, his hands still half raised. And then, unbelievably, he smirked. That's what happens when people waste my time, he muttered. Now pay up and get out. The elderly woman's knees shook, but she didn't fall. Slowly, deliberately, she bent down, gathering her spilled coupons with trembling fingers. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply straightened her back, her eyes filled not with fear, but with quiet resolve. Some customers began recording with their phones, whispering, "This is unbelievable, he's finished." Collins didn't notice. He thought he had won. But in truth, he had just lit a fuse. And the explosion that was coming would shake not just him, but his entire management team, down to the ground. The air inside the supermarket was heavy, suffocating. You could almost hear hearts pounding as everyone tried to process what they had just witnessed. The elderly woman stood frozen for a moment, her cheek glowing red from the sting of the slap. Her thin shoulders trembled, not just from the physical blow but from the humiliation of being struck in front of strangers. Her shopping cart wobbled as she steadied herself with her cane. For a fleeting second, she looked like she might crumble. But she didn't. Instead, she inhaled slowly, deeply, the way someone does when they've survived much worse storms. She bent down with quiet dignity, gathering the coupons and coins that had spilled across the floor. Her hands shook slightly, yet her movements were deliberate, controlled. The store, however, was anything but controlled. Customers whispered urgently. Did he really just hit her? Somebody call the cops. Is anyone going to do something? A man near the back lifted his phone high, recording everything. A teenager whispered to her friend, "This is going to go viral." The cashier, still behind the register, looked pale, her lips trembling. She wanted to speak, to protest, but fear kept her frozen. This was her boss, her paycheck. And she knew how he treated employees who dared to stand up to him. Collins, meanwhile, straightened his vest as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. His smirk deepened, mistaking silence for victory. He clapped his hands together sharply. "All right, enough drama. Ring her up without the coupons. Let's move this line along." The audacity of his words sent fresh waves of disbelief through the crowd. Customers exchanged outraged looks. A woman clutched her child protectively, pulling him closer. But the elderly woman said nothing. She stood slowly, her back straighter than before, her chin lifted just enough to show that she wasn't broken. She placed the last coupon gently into her purse and zipped it shut. Her silence was more powerful than any words could have been. Collins, irritated by her calmness, leaned closer. "You hear me, old lady? No more holding up my line. Pay and get out before I have security drag you out." The elderly woman finally lifted her gaze, locking eyes with him. Her voice, when it came, was soft but steady. "You made a mistake." Collins chuckled, mocking her. "The only mistake was letting you shop here in the first place." But she didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her purse, not for coupons this time, but for her phone. With careful, deliberate motions, she tapped a number and lifted it to her ear. The entire checkout line went silent again. Everyone strained to hear her words. "Yes, baby," she said softly when the call connected. "It happened again. Can you come?" Her tone was calm, almost gentle, but it carried weight. The kind of weight that made even the customers shiver. She ended the call and slid the phone back into her purse. No anger. No tears. Just quiet composure. Collins rolled his eyes. "Oh, please. What's your daughter gonna do? Lecture me? She's not welcome here either." But a few employees exchanged nervous glances. They knew something Collins didn't. They'd heard rumors about who her daughter was. And if those rumors were true, Collins had just set himself on a collision course he couldn't win. The elderly woman placed her hands firmly on the cart, her face still stinging but her spirit unshaken. She didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to argue. Because justice was already on its way. And within minutes, the man who thought he was untouchable would discover just how wrong he was. The supermarket seemed trapped in a strange limbo, half buzzing with murmurs, half swallowed in stunned silence. Customers still clutched their carts, staff stood stiff as statues, and the fluorescent lights hummed on as though nothing had happened. Yet everyone knew something monumental had just been set into motion. The elderly woman gripped the handle of her cart, her knuckles pale against the metal. The sting on her cheek burned, but her dignity held firm. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. Instead, she exhaled slowly, the way someone does when patience turns into resolve. Her phone rested in her palm like a hidden weapon. One call. That's all it had taken. She didn't need to say much. Her daughter already knew the tone of her voice, the tremor underneath her steady words. She knew that if her mother was calling, something serious had happened. Collins, the manager, paced near the register like a wolf who thought he'd scared the flock into submission. His smirk widened with every second of silence. To him, silence meant control. He mistook composure for weakness. "Don't think your little phone call is going to change anything," he sneered. "Your daughter can come down here all she wants. This is my store, and I run it how I see fit." The elderly woman didn't answer. She simply adjusted her glasses and placed her purse back into her cart. Her silence irritated him more than any words could have. A mother in line bent down to her child, whispering, "Watch closely, sweetheart. You're about to see what real strength looks like." Meanwhile, the cashier's hands trembled as she continued scanning items. Her eyes darted between the elderly woman and the store's front doors, as if waiting for something, someone, to arrive. The customers' whispers grew heavier. Who did she call? Maybe her son's a lawyer? No. I heard her daughter's someone important. Important how? The rumors swirled, each one more dramatic than the last. Collins, overhearing, barked out a laugh. Important? Don't make me laugh. Important people don't waste their time shopping here. She's bluffing. Old people love to bluff. The elderly woman finally spoke, her voice low, almost a whisper, yet it cut through the tension like a blade. You've already lost, son. You just don't know it yet. The words made Collins pause for a fraction of a second. His jaw twitched, his smirk faltered. But pride snapped it back into place. We'll see about that. Minutes ticked by, each one dragging heavier than the last. The hum of the automatic doors seemed louder now, as if everyone was waiting for them to part. Even the children in the line had gone quiet, sensing the weight in the air. The elderly woman reached for a bottle of water from her cart, twisting the cap slowly. She took a sip with calm dignity, as though she were waiting for something inevitable, like the turning of the tide. And then it happened. Outside, the distant rumble of an engine grew louder, cutting through the chatter. The sharp purr of a luxury car's engine, a sound that didn't belong in the cracked asphalt parking lot of a suburban grocery store, drew heads toward the glass doors. A sleek black car pulled up, its paint gleaming beneath the harsh afternoon sun. The driver's door opened with a quiet click, and the sound of high heels striking pavement echoed like a drumbeat of authority. Inside the store, people craned their necks to see. Customers held their breath. Employees leaned forward, eyes wide. The elderly woman, for the first time since the slap, allowed a small smile to touch her lips. Her reinforcements had arrived. And within moments, the man who thought himself untouchable would discover the true meaning of power. The automatic doors slid open with a sharp hiss, and the sound of high heels striking the tile echoed through the supermarket like a judge's gavel calling a courtroom to order. Every head turned. She entered without a word, without a smile, without even glancing at the long line of gawking customers. Her presence alone was enough to command attention. Tall, poised, and dressed in a tailored navy suit, she moved with the confidence of someone who had walked into far more intimidating rooms than this. A leather briefcase dangled from her hand, her heels clicking in steady rhythm, each step deliberate, powerful. The crowd parted instinctively, giving her a clear path, as though they sensed she wasn't just another shopper, she was something more. Collins, the store manager, puffed up his chest. He saw a woman in an expensive suit and assumed this was his chance to show off his authority. He stepped forward, blocking her path. "Ma'am," he said smugly, "this is private store business. Customers need to stay out of it." The woman didn't break stride. She looked him up and down with cool, piercing eyes, eyes that had already measured him, sized him up, and found him lacking. She sidestepped him effortlessly, not wasting breath on his arrogance. Her destination was clear, the elderly woman still standing by the register, one hand resting firmly on her cart. "Mom." The daughter's voice was soft, but the power behind it made people straighten in their seats. She closed the distance quickly, her expression shifting as she caught sight of the red mark still blazing on her mother's cheek. The crowd gasped as realization rippled through them. Mom? This wasn't just any woman. This was the daughter the elderly woman had called. Collins blinked in surprise, his smirk faltering. He hadn't expected this polished stranger to be related to the woman he had just humiliated. The daughter gently touched her mother's face, her thumb brushing against the sting of the slap. Her jaw tightened, her eyes darkened. She didn't need to ask what had happened, every detail was written on her mother's skin. Her voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Who put their hands on my mother?" The silence that followed was deafening. No one dared to move. No one dared to speak. Collins swallowed hard, then forced a laugh. "This is ridiculous. I don't know who you think you are, but your mom was causing trouble. I did what I had to do to keep things moving." The daughter turned slowly, her gaze cutting to him like a blade. She didn't raise her voice, didn't take a step forward, but her presence pressed on him heavier than any shout could. The cashier, trembling behind the register, couldn't hold it in anymore. "It was him," she blurted. Mr. Collins slapped her. Right in front of everyone. Gas shot through the line again. Collins spun toward the cashier, his face burning red. You stay out of this if you want to keep your job. But it was already too late. The daughter slipped her hand into her briefcase, pulling out a sleek leather wallet. She flipped it open and held up an ID badge. The gleam of the corporate seal silenced the entire room. The badge read, Regional Director, Corporate Headquarters. The crowd erupted into whispers. She's the regional director? She runs this place? Oh, he's done. Collins's face drained of color. He stammered, his confidence evaporating. Wait, you work for the company? The daughter's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile, though it carried no warmth. Work for the company? No, Mr. Collins. I run the company in this region. The silence that followed was thicker than before. Employees shifted nervously. Customers leaned forward eagerly, knowing they were about to witness justice unfold. The elderly woman rested her hand on her daughter's arm, her eyes shining with quiet pride. The storm had arrived. And it was about to sweep the entire management team off their feet. The store felt like a courtroom now, customers the jury, employees the witnesses, and the daughter, the sudden, commanding judge presiding over it all. She took a single step toward Collins. He stumbled back, suddenly unsure of the ground beneath him. The smug arrogance that had carried him through countless power trips evaporated like smoke in a storm. Mr. Collins, she said, her voice crisp, measured. Is it true you put your hands on my mother? Collins's throat bobbed as he swallowed. Now, wait just a minute, he stammered. She was being disruptive, causing a scene. I did what any manager would do to control the situation. The daughter's eyes narrowed, and her tone cut through his excuses like glass. Control the situation? By assaulting a 70-year-old woman? The cashier spoke up again, her voice shaking but steady. I saw it. Everyone saw it. She wasn't causing trouble. She was just asking about the discount she's always had. He snapped. The elderly woman's voice rose, trembling with dignity. All I did was ask for what I was promised. And he slapped me. The crowd murmured, anger boiling beneath the surface. Customers folded their arms, glaring at Collins. Phones were out now, cameras rolling, red dots flashing, his downfall was being recorded from every angle. The daughter turned slowly, addressing not just Collins but the entire staff gathered around. I need each of you to understand something clearly. This store, this entire chain, exists to serve the community, not to humiliate it. And certainly not to abuse it. Her words rang across the aisles, echoing with authority. Employees shifted uncomfortably, some nodding in agreement, others lowering their heads, ashamed. Collins tried one last desperate move. Listen, you can't just walk in here and... The daughter cut him off with a raised hand, sharp as a stop sign. Enough. The word cracked like a whip. The room froze. She stepped closer, her voice now cold steel. I asked you a direct question. Did you strike my mother? Collins's jaw clenched. Beads of sweat gathered on his forehead. His pride fought to keep him silent, but the weight of the stairs, the evidence, the truth pressing in on him left him cornered. Finally, his words came out, weak and defensive. She provoked me. Gasps filled the air. Customers shook their heads, disgusted. The daughter's expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Provoke you, she repeated, her tone sharp enough to cut through stone. A loyal, elderly customer, my mother, provoke you into raising your hand? That's your defense? Collins shrank under the weight of her words. She straightened, her voice rising, not with rage, but with authority that carried the weight of her title. Then hear this, all of you. Effective immediately, you are suspended from your duties. Security will escort you off these premises within the hour. Consider this store off limits to you. Collins's face twisted in disbelief. Suspended? You can't do that. Her eyes burned with quiet fire. Mr. Collins. I don't suspend people who slap my mother. The pause that followed was brutal. I fire them. The words landed like a hammer. The crowd erupted into cheers and applause. Customers clapped, some even whistled, their voices rising in support. That's right, someone shouted. About time. Collins's mouth fell open. He tried to speak, but no words came out. His empire of intimidation crumbled in an instant. Two security guards, alerted by the commotion, appeared at the doorway. They looked to the daughter for confirmation. She gave a single nod. Remove him. The guards moved in. Collins struggled weakly, sputtering excuses, but it didn't matter anymore. His reign over the store was finished. He was marched out past rows of customers who recorded every humiliating second, their eyes gleaming with justice. The daughter turned back to her mother, her face softening instantly. She reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it gently. It's over, Mom. He'll never hurt you again. But even as relief rippled through the store, one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. The storm wasn't finished yet. The echoes of applause still lingered when the daughter's heels clicked sharply against the tile once more. She wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She turned to face the employees gathered near the break room doors, the assistant managers, department leads, supervisors, faces pale, eyes wide, whispering nervously to each other. They had hidden behind Collins for years, letting him carry out his abuse while they looked away. But now, with their shield dragged out the door, the spotlight was burning hot on them. Let's not pretend, the daughter said, her voice cutting clean through the murmurs. One man does not create a toxic culture alone. Abuse only survives when others enable it. Her words landed heavy. Some managers shifted on their feet, others looked down, guilty, refusing to meet her gaze. She stepped closer, her tone razor sharp. How many of you stood by and let him humiliate employees? How many times did you ignore customer complaints because it was easier than holding him accountable? How many of you watched this very scene unfold and said nothing? The cashier's eyes filled with tears. We tried, she whispered. But every time someone spoke up, they were threatened or fired. The daughter nodded, her face softening for a moment. And that is exactly why leadership matters. Fear only grows when management feeds it. You all had the power to act. Instead, you let this rot spread. Her voice rose, echoing across the store, every word deliberate. This is not just Collins's failure. This is a failure of management. The crowd reacted instantly, applause mixed with murmurs of agreement. Customers folded their arms, glaring at the silent managers. Employees at the registers stood straighter, some whispering, finally, under their breath. One assistant manager dared to speak. Ma'am, with respect. Collins ran this store. We just followed orders. The daughter's eyes snapped to him. Cold, sharp. Following orders does not absolve you of accountability. Leadership is not about fear. It is about responsibility. And you failed that responsibility. The assistant manager shrank, his excuse crushed under the weight of her words. The daughter's voice dropped lower, steadier, each syllable deliberate. Effective immediately, every member of this management team is relieved of duty. Pack your belongings and leave the premises before the end of the day. The room went still, then erupted. Customers cheered louder than before, clapping, shouting their approval. Employees behind the counters exchanged stunned glances, relief mixing with hope. Some even began to cry, realizing the weight that had been lifted. The managers froze, disbelief written on their faces. You can't fire us all, one sputtered, his voice trembling. The daughter leveled her gaze at him, calm and immovable. I can. And I just did. Her words carried the finality of a gavel striking wood. Security stepped forward again, watching the managers closely. The assistant managers looked at each other, pale and speechless, knowing resistance was useless. One by one, they lowered their heads and retreated to the back, shame trailing behind them. The daughter turned back to the room, her voice carrying not just authority but a promise. This store will no longer be a place of fear. From this day forward, it will serve its community with dignity and respect. And that starts now. The elderly woman, still holding her daughter's hand, stood taller. Pride radiated from her tired eyes. For the first time that day, she smiled. The daughter leaned closer and whispered, just for her mother, "You'll never walk into one of my stores and be treated as less than family again." The crowd erupted once more, clapping, cheering, phones held high to capture every moment. What had started as an act of humiliation had transformed into a public reckoning, one that would echo far beyond the walls of that supermarket. But the daughter wasn't done yet. One final step remained. The corporate sweep was coming. And when it landed, the whole chain would feel the shock. The supermarket buzzed like a live wire. Customers still clapped, employees whispered, and cameras recorded every angle. The managers were gone, Collins was gone, but the daughter knew her work wasn't finished. She walked to the customer service counter, setting her briefcase on the surface with a sharp click. The sound silenced the crowd instantly. She opened it, pulling out a slim laptop and a folder embossed with the company seal. "This," she began, her voice steady, commanding, "is not just about one store. It's about every store that thinks it can mistreat the very people who keep it alive. And today, that ends." The words rolled through the aisles like thunder. She tapped a few keys on her laptop. Corporate headquarters is already being briefed. Effective immediately, this location will undergo a full audit. Every policy, every complaint, every practice will be reviewed. Not just here, but across my entire region. Gasps echoed through the crowd. Employees exchanged wide-eyed looks. This wasn't just local change. This was corporate reform. She lifted the folder, snapping it open. Starting today, customer dignity will not be negotiable. Senior citizens will receive the discounts they were promised. Employees will be trained, not threatened. And every store manager who believes fear is leadership will be replaced. Applause thundered again, louder this time, echoing against the high ceilings. The daughter's gaze swept across the employees, landing on the cashier who had spoken up. "You," she said gently. "You had the courage to tell the truth, even when your job was at risk. That is what leadership looks like." The cashier's eyes widened, tears welling. "You're promoted," the daughter continued. "Effective immediately, you'll be trained as the new assistant manager. This store deserves leaders who care about people, not power." The crowd erupted. Customers whistled, clapped, shouted words of encouragement. The cashier covered her mouth with her hand, overwhelmed, as her coworkers hugged her in celebration. The daughter turned back to the elderly woman beside her. "And as for you, Mom, from this day forward, every store in my region will honor senior citizens with lifetime customer appreciation discounts. What happened to you will never happen to another elder again." The elderly woman's eyes glistened. She reached up, cupping her daughter's face with trembling hands. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. The daughter smiled, soft but fierce. "No, Mom. I'm proud of you. Because you taught me to never back down." The crowd's cheering grew to a roar. Phones recorded, social media feeds filled in real time. What had begun as humiliation for one elderly woman had turned into a sweeping corporate reform that thousands, maybe millions, would hear about by tomorrow. The daughter snapped her briefcase shut and addressed the room one final time. "Let this store be the example. If you respect your customers, they'll build your business. If you abuse them, you'll answer to me." The words landed heavy, final, unstoppable. As she wrapped her arm around her mother and guided her toward the exit, the automatic doors slid open again. But this time, the air was different. Light poured in from the setting sun, golden and warm, spilling across the floor like a promise. The storm had passed. And in its place stood justice. The customers cheered one last time as mother and daughter walked out together, heads high, dignity intact, leaving behind a store forever changed. Collins and his managers were gone. Fear was gone. What remained was hope. And hope, unlike fear, was contagious.